Secretary Yellen, Janet Yellen of the Treasury, was looking to implement, was looking to encourage the implementation of an alternative international minimum corporate tax. So what would that mean? So if you filed your taxes, you may have heard something about the alternate minimum tax. So the alternate minimum tax is essentially to say, you know, if you make such and such amount of money and you qualify for all these loopholes, you can't get away with paying nothing. Now, some corporations do, but this is the alternate minimum tax applies primarily to individuals. So it says that as an individual, if you make a certain amount of money and you qualify for a certain number of loopholes such that you would pay less than a certain amount of tax calculated by your income, you instead pay that alternate minimum tax instead. So say I make $100 million and I qualify for all these loopholes, I would have to pay, I don't know, let's just make the numbers easy, $10,000 in taxes this year. If the alternate minimum tax says, well, actually you have to pay $27,000, again, just making numbers up, then I would have to pay that $27,000 figure instead of the $10,000 figure, which is what I would actually pay if there was no alternate minimum tax, which, you know, because of all the things that I qualify for. The idea of an alternate minimum tax is to make sure that everyone pays something into the system, that some base level of taxation is collected from all income. And this is for the purpose of just making sure that people aren't getting away with making massive amounts of money and not contribute from the societies that they are in while not contributing to those societies whatsoever. So the alternate minimum tax is a good thing. It should probably be higher than it is, but that's a discussion for another day. What would an international alternate minimum tax look like? So this is hard to say, and the question really becomes, is it enforceable? It probably isn't. As I mentioned in my last segment just a second ago, the issue with international treatises and things like that is you always have a race, you always trigger race to the bottom politics. You will always have some country or some actor who says that I can gain by not being in lockstep with this treaty or agreement and allowing for these corporations to come spend their money with me instead, right? So it's difficult to see why this would be proposed if it's not enforceable, but let's just say for a moment it is enforceable. What would it look like? So essentially it would say that every nation, you know, you would say, let's just take a retail company, for example. So say you're a retail company and you operate in Sweden. Why not? Just think of random countries. And you operate in Sweden. Sweden would say, all right, for any goods and services that you sell here, regardless of where they're made, you are going to pay so much tax on them. So regardless of where that country's based, they'd have to do that. And every country would have some number that they said, you know, based on, you know, whatever volume of goods or the net, or the gross worth of services performed, or goods and services. Yeah, that's pretty much it, just goods and services. So you would use some calculation to evaluate the amount of goods or services being brought into a country from abroad or wherever, and any company that wasn't based in Sweden would pay that tax to do business in Sweden. It's essentially a right to do business tax. Whereas companies that were based in Sweden would be exempt from that tax to encourage companies to move to Sweden and create jobs there and do business there, right? So you could have an international company that had a workforce in Sweden that could dodge the tax that way. But it's not really a tax dodge because the national government is benefiting from the corporation's presence there, provided that they're paying the requisite national taxes, and that there is some alternate minimum tax involved for corporations and things like that. So in theory, this is great, right? Because every country essentially says, no matter where your goods are manufactured, once they come here, you have to pay taxes on them. Now, it's true that this would increase the price of goods a little bit. But corporations are actually quite good at either absorbing these costs or passing them off to consumers in a way that doesn't make them that doesn't make the product so expensive that it won't be purchased. Remember, corporations have many options by which to make profit. They can either make profit on individual items, they can make profit on bulk items, they can undercharge for some and overcharge for others. They can use volume profits. There's lots of ways that corporations can make money. So this tax idea, again, would be great if you could get everyone to do it. Because if you don't, now again, caveat about some consumer markets being too large to avoid, but for the most part, the issue would then become race to the bottom politics, because countries would simply just decide they don't want to sell products in some markets because of the tax. And again, by the way, it would be about an enforcement mechanism, right? So you'd have to find a way on an international scale to punish companies who don't adhere to this, or to punish countries that don't adhere to it, and thus making their cost of business lower. And there's really no good way to do that, except for by force and imperialism. And as a socialist, I'm inherently opposed to those things. But also, I personally don't believe in those things, regardless of the fact I'm a socialist. So it's an interesting idea. And I mean, I'm not going to give props to Janet Yellen for proposing it, but it's an interesting idea that if there was a real effort to get it moving, to really do it, then it would be good. But if there's not going to be that kind of momentum for that kind of idea, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to try and implement it because you're going to create the same types of issues that you have with all international commerce, which is race to the bottom politics and economics.